By the way, I have found out Hulk Hogan is coming back. He's just going to have a new name.
Mr. America.
Dun, dun, dun.
No, the Grand Wizard.
Oh, God.
That's how we could do it. Kray-Z comics and stories in color.
No, in living color.
And get interviewed by I Like a Superman. So, do you like it, Batman? He set me up. He asked me that at the shop one time, back in the closet when I was watching the shop and the guys were out of town. So, do you like it, Batman? Because the Batman movie was coming out. I go, yeah, I like Batman. I like a Superman. Hello, and welcome once again to Kray-Z Comics and Stories, very special episode, number 200.
Does that mean Gordon Jump's going to be here?
Gordon. Yes, he'll be.
Is he going to touch people?
Well, we'll WKRC.
I don't mean that.
I am your guest, charming and delightful host, Butch, and I am literally on the other end of the series of tubes and wires that Cory calls the internets with the namesake of this show, Kray-Z Joe Ryder himself.
What the hell are you doing in my basement?
You listen to me.
This is my song.
This is my shop.
Butch, why'd you get here?
And now on the other end, for once on the other end, not doing all the talk. Oh, he'll still be doing all the talk.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is Cory, not to be confused with Luther, Strode.
Thanks a lot. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard.
That's who he is.
Not in the driver's seat this time.
Thank God.
But he'll still be in the driver's seat because I need all the direction I can. You guys have me. What is this, the second episode already?
Yeah, we got through the first one really well. And we just figured we'd try to see if we could get to episode 200.
Oh, 200?
Yeah.
You'd think I know that since I said it.
Yeah, have you listened to all 200?
Well, some of them.
I haven't.
Some of them.
I haven't. I'm not even sure I was in all of them.
I'm going to be conducting a little interview of sorts with a couple of my good pals.
Oh, no.
Well, we'll bring them in later.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
You guys are gone. I guess since I'm not as charming and delightful of a host as I think, I'll just start in with some questions. I know that the first thing I want to know about somebody, and I know this about you guys to a degree, but certainly not enough. Where'd you come from? Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? And I know, Joe, sitting here, you were born in you grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Born, yeah.
Cory, you came from Central Illinois, and I think this has all been mentioned many times in the show, but what was your home life like, and what was your family like, your parents, brothers and sisters, and how did they have an influence on, not necessarily the person you became today, I think we should get to that later, but the kid you were developing into a crazy comic fan, and I can certainly relate to that myself because the same thing happened to me.
Joe, do you want to go first?
No.
No, okay. Cory, you go first.
All right. I was actually born in a town named Macomb, Illinois, where I also went to college years later because it was the only hospital around. Spent the earliest part of my life outside the town of Smithfield, a town of 250 people.
Holy crap, Macomb, Illinois has its own Wikipedia entry. That's big.
I know.
Big stuff.
Well, they've got Western Illinois University there.
You're like in the pregnant part of Illinois.
Yes. My parents were very young when they had me. They got married to have me, which is kind of something that happens in rural areas.
Genetics.
Also happens in St. Paul, I hear.
Yeah. And I was the firstborn, and my mother has told me for years that I taught myself to read when I was 3 years old. What it was, Dad would work, and we had a 160-acre farm with cows and pigs and horses, and we grew corn and soybeans and all that stuff.
Pushing that sheep through the fence.
So he was very busy, and my mom was handling the house and taking care of stuff, and I, even back then, had very little patience. So there was one time she'd bought me a new Disney comic, and I wanted her to read it to me. And she said, when I get done making supper and everything, and I guess by the time she got done, I was sitting on the couch sounding out the words in the comic.
Attaboy. He was smart.
So comics were always there as kind of a part of my life. And because we lived out far away from town, there weren't any other kids around. And I pretty much kind of read or watched TV as my playtime. So I had a very active reading life, a very active imagination. And then when my sisters were born, of course, they were younger. I have 3 younger sisters, and 2 of them are very close in age. So they would sort of play dolls and stuff, and I would read or watch TV, stuff like that. And I think that's why I really sort of got into comics, because it was visual and reading at the same time. I still read a lot, but by the time I was 12 years old, I'd kind of hooked into Marvel Comics, and it really sort of grabbed me in the way that only something when you're 12 can grab you, where it's, this is the greatest stuff ever published ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked in the past, at that time at Marvel, they weren't just publishing new stuff, they were also publishing a lot of stuff from the Silver Age, from the 60s. So I'm reading Jack Kirby reprints of the Fantastic Four, George Perez on the Fantastic Four, the Romita Spider-Man, the Ditko Doctor Strange, the current Doctor Strange, all this stuff kind of at the same time. So I think it was kind of the perfect way to kind of hook a kid who's a little above, has above average intelligence, no one to talk to, and tons of curiosity.
Yeah. Wow. It brings me back. Joe, how about you? Are you into this?
Yes, I was born on the planet Krypton. I came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. I can leap tall buildings in a single bound, race a speeding bullet to its target, bend steel in my bare hands, and, who disguised as a mild-mannered Joseph Ryder, TSA groper, for the greater government of the United States of this here America, fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and underpants.
That's pretty much what I expected.
Yeah, I was at a radioactive spider, but
hey,
I
Cory,
went for the better one. No, I was, as you mentioned, born St. Paul, Minnesota. Been here most of my life, except when I was traveling on the road with TSA. Nothing really strikes me growing up. Middle-class family. Yeah. Mom was home. Dad worked. It's amazing the things I had growing up. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I wasn't for want of anything.
Oh, you were on that side of the tracks.
Yeah, pretty much. And went to a Catholic school, so recovering from that still. See, I got some marks where the nuns use those rulers.
Yeah,
pretty tough.
And broken rulers.
Pretty much. The comics I've talked about in the past, how I got into it was more, in Minnesota it's called Kris Kringle. I don't know what they call it other places, but it's like we had lots of cousins, and everybody drew a name out of the hat. You bought that cousin a gift as opposed to buying everybody a gift. And my cousin Jerry, who I blame repeatedly, he gave me 4 Fantastic Four comics and a Spider-Man. And I still have the Spider-Man comic. Actually, I have it slabbed somewhere. I went down to, at the time, Twin City Comics, which was on Dale Front in Como, which was Greg Ketter's first shop. Greg Ketter, of course, damn fine, handsome man.
And when was this? 1979?
Oh, Lord.
9?
Hang on a second here. I'm going to have to do some checking here on my.
Yeah, you go ahead. Go
Old
back to
internet.
the shop, do a walk.
Yeah, I do a little time travel here.
Mhm.
But the reason it was Amazing Spider-Man 178 that he gave me. So I went in with the 4 Fantastic Four comics. He bought them for me for 20 cents a piece. And I turned around and I bought number 179, which according to AtomicAvenue.com would put us at 1978. Yep. And
Does that say 4/1/78?
Yep.
April 1st.
That's the date it came out. And that was the first one I bought. And I was able to go backwards and forwards depending on where. But that's what started me going and buying comics habitually. Like I said, I still got the 178. I actually had it slabbed a number of years ago. It's like a 3.4. Read the snot out of it.
Those were great covers. That was an exciting.
Oh, yeah. The whole time when the third Green Goblin was going. And we've talked about actually last podcast. It was just one Spider-Man book.
Yeah.
So when they broke out into Peter Parker, it was like, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Greg Ketter moved his store around. I ended up following him until he finally closed his shop and then went to St. Paul Comic, where I walked in.
It was St. Paul Comic in downtown St. Paul.
At that time, yeah. I actually visited his shop first when he was up on Rice Street, in the second store, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I was downtown, and I was looking at books, and then this long-haired guy come over to me and goes, "Hey, what do you think of this comic over here? Do you really like it?"
Yeah. It's rumored that he did that to a lot of people.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like the first time I remember. I didn't get to know you until Pat and I started hanging out at Hot Comics. After John closed his shop, St. Paul Comics, we went there, and that's when we started to hang out. As far as other high school things, I mean, I really didn't care what people thought that I read comics, because it was usually things like
about that. It's almost like a closeted hobby, you know. And there was a point where, might have come out of that closet.
Well, I remember, I don't know if Pat recalls, but it was like I'd be reading comic books and guys, you read comic books? I go, yep. Hey, and the same guys who were like giving you a hard time about reading comics. Hey, I got study period next quarter, or next hour. You want to give me a comic to read or something?
Exactly.
And they were like, when they realized they weren't going to give me any shit for reading comics, someone I remember, I don't know who it was like, hey, this guy over here reads comics. Pat Gruber. First time I met Pat. Pat kind of looked at me like, you read comics too? Kind of like the way you came to me. And he's like, yeah. Like, why, you going to jump all over me too? So, as far as outside interest, I mean, I did a lot of things alone. I mean, I was the kid on the top of the hill. I mean, you're talking one city block, and it was a pain in the ass for every other kid to walk the entire top of the hill just to come hang with
You're lucky you got any mail.
And when I came down the hill, usually it was like, oh, well, you know, my son, I can only have 2 friends in, and you're 3, and you can't come in. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. So I did a lot of shit by myself. Yeah. You know, I mean, I'd head over to my cousin, with a brother of Jerry, the cousin who gave me my first comics. Yep. I'd go hang with him. You know, we did early versions of urban exploring where we'd, get up on top of factory roofs. Nearby, we have a place called Bandana Square. It used to be shops for Burlington Northern. And at that time, half the buildings were abandoned. We'd get into those, get in the sewers, It's amazing. And the sad thing is we didn't have cameras. If we had digital cameras, we'd have fantastic photographs.
Did you play superheroes back then like I did?
Not really. I mean, I remember putting a cape on and trying to jump off the picnic table before I tried the roof and not getting anywhere with it. I tried an umbrella and still didn't get anywhere.
Yeah, I know you can't fly.
No.
But in any urban exploring adventure, you inevitably start jumping around like you were some super-powered individual. And
I do remember one
blasting
time
things.
They had this particular building, and what they had done to keep people from getting up into it, they had cut the floor. So basically, there was a drop, and I don't know where it went because it went down deep. We had to jump across like
didn't.
6 feet into a hanging step.
You should have gone
And you
home.
hit the steps, go wow, wow, and we could climb up, explore the building. And we were reasonably sure we wouldn't get caught because you could hear anybody jumping across.
Oh.
I mean, you look at crap like that and you're like, man, it's a good thing I didn't end up dead.
Yeah, well, you could have got busted up and read a lot more comics.
Because I was a solo guy. I mean, I remember going to see Star Trek by myself.
Yeah.
Fell asleep during it.
Oh.
You know, Star Wars. I think
Bored yourself.
one guy went. Yeah, it was amazing. And Channel 5 was like recording right next to me. Star Trek's making it back, and I'm like,
let's not ask this guy.
So, yeah, I mean, I have no real regrets other than, the incidents.
Regrets. Cory, where'd you get your comic books? And we lived in a major metropolitan area, and back when, in the period Joe and I were talking about, I was just becoming aware of comic book stores' existence. But I can't imagine out, I suppose out where you were it was in drugstores and grocery stores and things like that, huh?
Yep, mostly grocery stores. And there was a head shop in Macomb. And my babysitter's older sister was dating a guy who read comics. And this was mid-'70s, so he'd just read them and pitch them. And she said, oh, well, one of the kids my sister babysits really likes comics. Let's just give them to him. So every time Brenda Derry would babysit me, there'd be this stack of comics. And he would buy the stuff like Doctor Strange and Warlock and the stuff that was aimed at older readers. A lot of Steve Gerber in there. It's one of the Steve Gerber, Don McGregor, Doug Mensch comics. That's where I kind of developed my love for those three writers, because they were like, oh, this isn't like the other stuff. This is more than just fights and soap operas. But I did not set foot in an actual comic shop until after I was out of high school. There was one that opened in Galesburg, Illinois. It was a comic shop that also rented videotapes.
Oh.
And it became the place where, before our family had a VCR, okay, we're going to have a weekend where we watch movies. We're going to rent a VCR and 5 movies. And I forget how much it was, but even, it was some outrageous amount.
Yeah.
Like probably $40, $50 to rent them for a weekend. And you'd have to reserve it a couple months in advance. But I would buy my comics there, so they'd give it, they'd knock off some of the price for me or let me reserve it a little earlier, which Mom and Dad liked. And that's where I discovered all the indie books, like the stuff that Pacific was ordering. And kind of before that, when I was in high school and had a job, when Micronauts, Moon Knight, and Kazar went direct sales only, there was a place in Texas I would order comics from called Camelot. And I just remember they used to have these huge 2-page ads in the Overstreet Price Guide. And every month there'd be the box, and I'd get to see what Gil Kane was doing on Micronauts and get to see all the cool stuff that Bill Sienkiewicz was doing on Moon Knight and the regular comics. But walking into a comic shop, I remember the first time, they had back issues, they had this, and my friend who was with me said, well, what do you think of the place? I said, I want to be buried here. And I think a lot of people, there have been comic shops kind of ubiquitous for so many years, really since Marvel did that in 81, that they don't know of a time when, New Fantastic Four is supposed to be out this week. I'll go to the grocery store. It's not there. I'll go to Ben Franklin. I'll go over to Walgreens. And none of them have it. Well, there's this place in Canton. There's a newsstand in Canton. If I can figure out how to get a ride there, they have a ton of comics there. And, boy, it was a struggle to get to that newsstand in Canton because nobody ever went to Canton, Illinois. We always would go to, Galesburg or Peoria. Canton was closer, but, there's really nothing there.
Yeah, we had, we talked St. Paul Comic, I went to Dreamhaven, and of course Schindler's was all over the place. And that wasn't even counting Minneapolis, where they had Comic City.
A whole city?
Of comics.
Oh.
It's amazing.
Whoa. Yeah, I heard about it. We lived very close to all the comic books we needed, but actually up until that point, I was a pretty young kid. It was take what you can get too, off of the spinner rack at a corner store or at a grocery store. And I often wonder what would have become of me if that was my only option, No actual comic shop. Well, anyway, so now we're all reading comic books and we're all overcommitted, and Joe's getting interested in the retailing end of it.
Did you ever go to any of John's comic shops? Or John's
Yeah,
cons?
you bet. I went
so
to
you
all.
Probably ran into us there.
I bought a book from Gruber at the first con in '83.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was one of those early Spider-Man Molten Man issues with the Ditko ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 28 or 35 or something. Well, Cory, you know all the Amazing Spider-Mans.
It was in the 20s, I know that.
Issue 27,
it was after
28.
Liz Allen kind of became an almost girlfriend to Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. Got it from Pat for like $2.50 or something. And we talked about it here at his so-called last sale at the recent convention.
Still got it.
Yeah.
He's had more last sales than I've had warm meals.
Well said. But anyway, Cory, you were so furious for comics, you had to get out of the small town, huh?
Well, there were a lot of reasons I left.
Okay.
First off, there weren't any jobs.
Oh, yes. Now,
I got out of
is this
college.
pre-college? Okay.
Nope. I went to college pretty much where I grew
Okay.
up, in Macomb, Illinois. I went to junior college for 2 years because I was paying for a lot of it myself. So junior college was cheap. And then I went to regular college. And when I graduated, I've got this degree in psychology.
Okay.
And I'd had a plan because I was submitting stuff. You guys talked about how you wanted to play superheroes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I never did that.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to be Stan Lee. I wanted to write comics ever since I saw the credits and figured out, that means this person wrote it and this person drew it and this person went over it with ink. And as soon as I figured that out, I wanted to be the guy who wrote the comics. So I was submitting stuff to Marvel and then some smaller publishers at the time. But my plan was to join the Peace Corps.
You still have your rejection letters?
Oh, no. I think I may have my acceptance letters from companies that went under months later.
Yeah.
That happened a lot. But my plan was to join the Peace Corps, be in that for 2 years, kind of travel the world, because I was one of those people, I want to save the world. And then when I got done with that, figure out where I wanted to live and kind of work with my psychology degree and write at night until I broke into the industry.
Right, now, what superpowers did you have that you were going to save the world with? And heat vision, invisibility?
No, my college degree in psychology.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, that's a power I never came close to having.
But instead, I got married, and there were no jobs in Central Illinois. I've told this story a few times. I don't know if I've ever told it on the podcast. Had a resume, and I would fill out applications, and you think you get out of college, you're going to be able to get a college job. There wasn't anything around because it was the middle of a recession. And I remember the straw that kind of broke the camel's back was I went to a Kentucky Fried Chicken for an interview. And they said in the interview, we're not going to hire you because you're not looking at this as a career.
Mm-hmm. We want you for life.
And the woman I was getting married to, her mother lived in Minneapolis, sent us the Minneapolis One ads.
Oh.
And it was bigger than our Sunday paper in Peoria.
Oh, it was huge back in those days.
So we drove up here, and I just went every place applying. And I got on at a video store, so we moved up here for that job. And then the owner's son failed college. So he needed a job. So she let me go, By the way, this was a week and a half before Christmas, 10 days before
Is
Christmas.
that irony? The
Well, not only
dropout
that,
got the job.
yeah. But here's what made it even more fun. Yeah, my wife had said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to go out to eat after your shift. I've got something important to tell you." And at work, I get told that I'm being let go. So I go to the restaurant, and she says, "I've got big news." And I say, "Well, so do I." And I don't remember who went first, but hers was, "I'm pregnant," and mine was, "I'm out of work."
Serendipity, baby!
So that was not a fun Christmas.
Are there fun
But
Christmases?
I started applying at all the comic shops in town, and I got hired at Schindler's, but I also got hired at a group home where they said, "Well, we've only got every other weekend, and there won't be a lot of hours. And if you ever put in at a group home, they're going to hire you, and they say they don't have a lot of hours, just wait." Because within a month, you could get all the hours you want.
Now, why is that? Is that because there's a lot of turnover?
A lot of turnover. It's a really tough job. It was juvenile justice.
That's right.
And people burn out on that really fast. I think the reason I didn't burn out on it was out of just sheer fear of poverty. And my first year in the field, I was terrible. I look back on how I was in that field. I would have fired me that first year. I was terrible. I didn't have boundaries. I would allow residents to do stuff that they shouldn't do. I was just a pain in the ass until one weekend where everything just kind of blew up and I had no control. And the therapist who was brought in, for working with the residents but also training us, kind of said, "All right, that's what happens when you do the stuff that you do. Do you want to learn how to do this job right?" And I buckled down, and within about 3 months, I think I really turned into a good staff in that industry, to the point where I stayed there until that group home closed.
Were you still harboring a desire to do comics at the time? I assume you were.
I was, until the comic convention started here in Minnesota.
Right.
And we had people who worked at Marvel who basically said, "Look, if you want to work in the industry, if you want to work on Spider-Man or Batman or any of these characters, you got to move to New York, and you got to get either an unpaid internship and become known around the office, or one of the lower proofreader jobs." And by that time, I had a son that I was raising on my own, and I couldn't see moving to New York and either abandoning him or bringing him to New York and us kind of starving to death slowly. So instead, my writing went toward prose and novels and short stories. And I've had limited success with the short stories. And I've got a bunch of novels that I'm kind of figuring out what I'm going to do with over the next 2 years. But the more you hear about working in the comics industry as a writer, the more it's just that I wouldn't have lasted an hour. Don McGregor had trouble working in the industry. I would have been worse. I would have been fighting with everybody. I would have been... Well, it would not have worked.
I'd like to think you'd have led the pack to the point where writers are much more respected and highly regarded and even followed today. Back in the older times, in 1990 or so in the 80s, I don't remember anybody following a book because of the writer. What do you think? Alan Moore maybe cracked the ice on that one?
I think there were writers that people followed, but artists were more... Comics are driven by art, because I've talked about how when I read a comic, I'd buy a Jack Kirby book. But let's say it's a George Perez book written by Joe Brony.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick that up.
Okay.
I'll pick up, I'd pick up a Marv Wolfman book even if it was drawn by Carmine Infantino in the late 90s when he didn't give a shit.
Back when he had the square for his jaws.
Or, a Don McGregor book. Now I appreciate the art on Saber so much more, but back then it's like, this is really kind of sketchy, and I don't know if I much care for
You
it.
show boobies.
Yeah,
That's why I bought it.
Yeah.
But it's Don McGregor, so I'm gonna buy it.
Yeah, and Joe was just at the right age where a more mature book was just what he needed. Joe, did you ever think about being a creative on the creative end of comics, or did you just steer straight into retailing?
I thought about the same thing because I had no artistic talent, and I thought about writing.
Mm-hmm.
I even wrote, well, I didn't really write, but I kind of did outlines of everything that I was doing, and everybody I knew was part of it.
Oh, okay.
But my problem was I couldn't come up with an original name to save my souls. So basically, my friends were, let's see, I was Captain Beefheart.
Okay, of course.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, my buddy Dave, I call him the dupe. His powers were to fool people, and when he started to study martial arts, I mixed that in.
So he wasn't just a hapless dude. He was a hero.
No, but he had a way of making you, like, if you went to attack him, he could make you think you attacked him, but then you realize he didn't as he knocks you out. My one buddy Rick.
They call him the Scarlet Witch in the
nowadays, yeah. Although he was no witch. Actually, no, that was one of my buddies, Pat. He was the warlock, and he actually self-proclaimed himself as a warlock growing up, so it wasn't a big stretch. My buddy Rick, he was a big guy, and he was the bulk.
The bulk.
The bulk. Yeah, you see, I have problems with the names. The girls we fought against, a redhead that I was going out with, I called her Aqualung after Jethro Tull. I don't know why. It just seemed like something to do. Let's see. One was Shunzo, like a screaming blue or green-haired demon. Obviously, she didn't like that description. Gluckenschmuck. I have no idea where that came from.
Is that a tag team?
I don't know where it came from. Some musical group.
We're going to start that tag team, Cory.
And Apple Scruff from, I think, a George Harrison song. They were the mothers of invention, which you can see how original I was. We were the Time Bandits based off the movie because again, if I liked it, it was cool. So I'd write down all these elaborate outlines. My origin, my superpowers were undefined, and later as I got older, I realized my superpowers were I could do anything. I just had to know how to do it. So I couldn't do brain surgery because I would have to study to do it. But if I wanted to, like,
come up with an original idea for a comic book,
or like if I wanted this thing I'm standing on to suddenly propel me through the air, whatever. So I write down the outlines depending on what was going on. It's like I broke up with the girlfriend I was going with, and then we'd get together and blah blah blah. And they got real elaborate, and as people would come in and go, I'd write different things. The first time I saw Doctor Who, now this was like Tom Baker, Doctor Who, I wrote him into my origin story. Apparently, it's very popular. I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. And so one day I was going through some boxes. This was back when I was still living with my folks. And the box that had all these outlines in, waterlogged. We had a damp basement. Water came in during a rainstorm, and it just like a super soaker, just right up through the bottom.
Yeah.
And everything just right in. To this day, I still remember bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, do I ever want to sit down and rejigger it? I'm like, not really. I mean, it was just something fun I did. I had no idea. I mean, I realized if I actually did have a chance to write this comic, I would have to think of names. I couldn't think of names to save a soul. I figured the way I would break into comics, I would be a letterer.
A letterer.
So I would start, and this started about sophomore year, junior year, printing everything I did. Yeah. And I can print to this day faster than most people can write. And I can't, I mean, it's sloppy. I mean, I think I had somebody once, I don't know if it was at the shop or when I was at Sears, they were like, well, somebody wrote me this note and it looks like it was written by a 3-year-old. And I'm like, I took offense at that because I'm trying to, write in straight lines and write the letters good. And obviously a dead-end career because now everything's computer.
Retired from lettering at that point.
What led me on to the comic retailing thing when I met with Pat and the aforementioned guy, Pat Gruber, so it was like PG, both of them.
Good.
And we got together and we decided we were going to form kind of a comic book club. Because again, Pat Gruber, he was kind of it was more of an outcast, you know. He was.
Oh yeah.
People really didn't like him, which is probably why I liked him a lot. He's still a friend of mine to this day. And he liked comic books. Gruber liked comic books. I like comic books. So we got together and we thought, you know, we're going to form a comic book club. And we'd look at the advanced comics at the time, because these other things like Heroes World and previews, those were exotic catalogs that we didn't see that often. We got advanced comics each month from John. And we look at it and we decide, okay, we're going to buy these comics, we're going to invest them in it, and then we'll sell them whenever. And sure enough, the first comic come out, you knew it was going to be a surefire hit, guaranteed to get us through college.
And what was that?
Saga of the Swamp Thing #1.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think Gruber and I must have...
that series was all downhill after that.
Oh, yeah. And then Alan Moore cat. Oh, man, did he ruin it.
Yeah. All downhill.
Pat Gruber dropped out of school, disappeared. And then Pat and I were like, well, what are we going to do? Well, let's keep buying comics. Eventually, it got to the point where we got ready to do our first comic book show, which was, again, held by John across from his shop.
Yep, 1983.
And we were up to like 4 in the morning. We ran out of bags. We were running out of cardboard. We're using baggies. Pat's mom is cutting out cardboard, or his brother or somebody. Fell asleep at 4, got up at 7, went to the con.
Ooh.
And I don't remember much about the con. I do remember the first time. I think that the big book I had was Uncanny X-Men #1. It was when I graduated high school. I took the money and I was going to invest it in one book, and I had a choice between a Carl Barks print, which were real big at the time in the 80s, or an Uncanny X-Men 1. And I bought the Uncanny X-Men #1.
Oh, were these at St. Paul Comics?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I should have bought the Carl Barks print, because those things have gone like into the thousands of dollars. Anyways, at the time, I think I paid like $150. By the time the con came around, I had put like $400 on it, put it up on the wall. Con opens up. Some guy comes up and goes, I'll buy that. So I take it down. Oh, cool. It's $400. What? $400? I thought it said 40. And I was like, that was the first asshole I ran into many at all these shows. And I'm like, you dickwad. I think what he was doing is thinking, oh, here are these dumbass kids. He wouldn't know a $400 comic from a $4 comic. And
how
he just
far
tried
out
to
of high
scam
school
me.
were you guys at this point? You and Pat
When
graduated
John's
together?
first show was what, 85?
It was in 83.
83?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were graduated, and his show was in the fall, so we might have been just like right out of that. It was the one where
okay.
Don Simpson was there, Megaton Man guy.
Yeah, was he there? Ernie Chan was there.
Early Chan was there.
I don't remember if Simpson was at the first one or
you know what?
Just the
I
second
bet you
one.
Gruber and I went to that con, but we didn't set up till later, because we set up the one that Don Simpson was there. And
okay.
because he was like the first guy I ever got a sketch from.
Yeah, I was going to say, check your sketchbook.
Right when Megaton Man was ending and Border Worlds was beginning. Excuse me as I go
Cory,
to...
when did you discover conventions? Did you know about them before you went to one, or did you hear about it and immediately go to it?
I went to the Chicago Con in 84 and 85.
Oh, yeah, good one.
But there was one I went to in 79. It had to be a creation convention where it was Jim Shooter, Terry Gilliam,
Really?
and some other people. But, everybody was crowded around Jim Shooter finding out what was coming up with Marvel. And Terry Gilliam was there to promote Monty Python Life of Brian. And if I would have known Terry Gilliam back then, the way I know him now, I probably would have just sat next to him the whole time and listened to everything he said.
That's crazy.
I think our first cons that we went to were Hotel Leamington, downtown Minneapolis. And I remember Chris Claremont was there. I'd met C.C. Beck.
Wow.
Which was amazing because here, I didn't realize this till later, but I had to be about 12, and here I am just standing there with my Shazam #1.
Yeah.
And he's talking, and I'm just waiting patiently, and all of a sudden he turns around and I'm like, hey, what'd you think of this? And I'm like, he's talking to me. I still have this signed comic. Years later, as I'm reading Comic Buyer's Guide, I discover from Maggie Thompson that this is probably, he was like, oh my gosh, here's a kid reading my book.
Sure.
What does he think of it?
Sure.
And he was genuinely interested in me. I just like shut down and clammed up. Ah!
Now, if you were about 12, and this is backtracking a little bit, but when did you guys, and Cory talks about like buying a Kirby book, when did you guys discover that the creators made a difference in the book? Because when I first bought comic books, it was character based, I mean, if the Hulk was in it, I wanted to look at it, or, cool looking characters the Thing and stuff.
Spider-Man was it.
It was a while before, it was years. I started quite young, but it was years before I started to appreciate different creators on a book and be more interested in seeing the art of one guy or another, especially doing the characters that I loved.
I think for me, it started early because I noticed that, again, from past podcasts, my first X-Men comic that I bought was 138, which was the death of, was it 139? The death of Phoenix.
It was in there.
137.
137. That was the first one I bought.
And was that what inspired you to buy it? Because it was a big deal?
Yeah.
Or did you just fall into it?
I think I was finally getting into the X-Men thing because I remember John like, oh, you got to check this X-Men out. It was the biggest
always
thing.
honest about the X-Men, and I was buying Godzilla.
I know. Or Micronauts or something that really lasted. And I remember at the time when John recommended X-Men, I picked it up and it was 120 and it had Spider-Man in it. And then when I picked up 121, Spider-Man wasn't in it. And I thought, well, that's a ripoff.
Well, and the art was good, too, which kind of ties into what I was saying.
And that's what would happen is Pat and I bought this. And then when we started doing cons, we would start seeing, okay, certain people's artwork were going up in value.
That's right.
Including going crazy to try to find the first one, which John Byrne's first one, I think, was Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch, number 1 from Carlton Comics. So as artists would get hot, we would be searching these books out. And later on it became around like when Dark Knight came out. Everybody went nuts for Joker appearances. Animal Man got hot because of what Grant Morrison and Chaz Trug were doing.
That's what I call them.
Early Animal Man appearances were getting hot. DC Comics presents. So that was the way the market was. Again, remember, no internet, no eBay. Everything was your local comic store. If John came in and he told us, okay, Fish Police number 1 was $35. It was $35 because there was nowhere else you could go to buy it. So that's what we would do. That's how we started to realize character, especially artwork. Certain artists would be in demand. Certain characters would be in demand. I mean, when we found out that, like the Batman movie was going to have Penguin and Catwoman in it, boom, their appearances went up. Marvel's having Fool Killer miniseries come out. Oh, those Defender series went up.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how the market was driven. And of course, what went up went down. All these big comics that I remember, DC Comics Presents that had the Forgotten Heroes with Animal Man, selling them for $10 a piece at a con. Now they're back in the $2-3 bins.
Mm-hmm. And so your motivation was more retail based than like I was genuinely excited about the characters and the creator, the artists specifically. And I remember, like you said, a Fool Killer, for example, would come out and the back issue would go up, and I'd go, oh boy, and then I'd miss, you and Pat would get to the shop before me and buy the copy, and I'd miss out and be disappointed, and then or go back into my collection and go, hey, I've got that, and I always took pretty good care of my comics, and I thought that they would be worth something, but somehow they never parted from my hands. I never had the interest in actually selling them or as I say, parting with them. I didn't want to lose them. I wanted to be able to go back and reference it when I could. And you, I can't speak for Pat, but definitely from talking to you over the years, you're all about flipping it over. And if you need to, you'll just go get another one.
That was interesting, and we're jumping till when I get to the comics. But I got to the point, there were two things that were happening. First of all, I had credit card debt. I went to college. I got married. I had a family. Gruber, of course, was single. He was living in a parent's basement. Yeah. not the typical, I live in my parents' basement, because that boy was making some money working in banking.
Yeah, he wasn't stuck in his parents' basement.
No, he wasn't.
Not at all.
But he would spend money on hot back issues.
Oh, man.
So when the cons came around, he would have all the hot issues.
Yeah.
And I would be like, we'd split up the money afterwards. And comics we bought together started dwindling because Pat had less interest in buying comics together. We still did. We bought a bunch of Dark Knight hardcovers, which we made some decent money on.
Okay.
But it was kind of like the only way I could keep up with Pat in terms of money at the end of a con is if, okay, Pat is busy, the hot book is Fish Police, Samurai Penguins, and all the X-Men runs. So I will fill mine with lesser runs of Web of Spider-Man, whatever isn't hot, things like that.
Rom,
very hot, very well, except those X-Men issues. Those were hot.
Oh, they were hot.
Big time.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of my comic collection got eviscerated for whatever reason,
Sure.
Sure, I could go up and return and get them later, but it was like a lot of them, and I'm finding it even now as our long-term listeners listen to me talk about stuff I'm selling and trying to get rid of. Unless I can get it in Essentials or something, I'd rather, if I'm never going to read it again, I don't care. The collecting instinct really left me, I think, twofold. First of all, when I had the comic shops, I looked at comics as commodity, not investments. I read everything, which was great.
Yeah,
but you got jaded because I didn't need to buy it. I mean, if you came in, like you said, and, I missed the last copy of XYZ Comics, well, I got one here, take it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And then when Dana was born, my oldest daughter, I kind of came to the conclusion, you know what, there's more to life than just collecting comics.
Boy, you were way ahead of me on that one.
Oh, I'm just kind of like, you know what, I'm just going to have fun with it. It became a more business. I still enjoyed the heck out of it. And even when I had the small shop, Crazy Comics, it was fun because I got to read everything. I got to enjoy everything. Now, with budget in mind, if it doesn't really thrill me, even though it might be hot, it might be cool, I just let it go.
And he don't be fooled when he says he just may let it go, because I am surrounded by mountains and walls and shelves full of comics and books.
I'm telling you, my vast accumulation of crap. And we're in one room.
Awesome.
We haven't even gone into the other room or the garage yet.
Yeah, well, we're gonna.
But the sad thing is like you talk about going through a collection and discovering. Like here, as I'm doing this, I'm flipping through Amazing Spider-Man on Atomic Avenue. It's like Amazing Spider-Man 50, first appearance of Kingpin, near mint, 857. I had one of those at one time.
25 cents in the Schindler's bin when I was about 10 years old.
Oh yeah, I remember
all of those old issues. With the sticker right on the cover, you guys. The sticker gun.
I'm looking here. I remember that aforementioned Hotel Leamington convention. Picked up a copy. Guy was selling them for $12. Avengers 11 with Spider-Man. And I picked it up because I liked Spider-Man. And $12 was a lot of money to blow. God knows where it went. It's obviously sold. I mean, right now, near mint, $470.
Pat sold that to me at that first con for 50 cents.
Along with a copy of Little Mermaid VHS. Let me look up the.
He wasn't letting that go, Joe.
No, he does not.
Not clear to me.
I want to figure out the price of the Uncanny X-Men now.
Corey, do you feel like you're being left out? Do you have anything to add to what Joe's saying?
Am I still part of this show?
I hope so.
Special guest, Jane Wicked. No. I'm trying to figure out that. Anyways, if I could go back in time and tell myself something, it would be, don't sell anything. I mean, I've gone on and on about, like, there was a shop on Payne Avenue. And
Mike's Books.
Yeah. One day, a bad girl and I
know that because little Mike told me about it.
We were going to go to this guy's shop, and we hopped on the bus. We went the wrong way. We ended up in front of the Ford plant. Bus driver's like, "How you guys going to get off?" And we went the wrong way. So we finally get there, and I think he had like the Incredible Hulk 181 for $20. $20? That's a lot of freaking money. I can't tell you how many copies of Incredible Hulk 181 I've owned and then sold. Like, I went to $50. Sell it. I went to $100. Sell it. I always tease my mom.
Bought it for $100 and sold it for $50.
Do you remember when I asked for $50 to buy an Action Comics #1, and you said, nope, here's $10, go buy some comics. I mean, it's worth millions of dollars. No, I'd have flipped that sucker, pay $50, I'd have flipped it to make 60.
You wouldn't be having millions of dollars.
So, again, I tell myself, don't sell nothing.
I have a question that I wonder about everybody who accumulates any large quantity of comics. How on earth do we, because this applies to both of you guys, myself, and everybody listening, store our comics?
Well, you see how mine are.
Yeah, you need help, and I'm going to help you out with this.
Actually, a few years ago, my son asked if one of his friends could live here for a while. And I said, there's just no room, because one of the rooms was just comics. And he said, well, he'll pay enough so that you can get a rental space.
Wow.
And put the comics in.
It sounds like a lot of work still.
And I said, all right, you've got to move all the stuff there.
Doesn't sound like that much.
I got a job.
Cute.
And they moved the vast majority of my comics to this storage unit where they still are.
Wow.
And now, basically, because back issues are what they are, I have Marvel Unlimited. I read my stuff digitally much, much more, or in hardcover or paperback. And I look at those as, okay, when I retire, I'm just going to buy a little storefront and sell them off on eBay or in the shop, along with, any other crap that I can sell.
$7,800. That's what that Uncanny X-Men #1's going for now. Con!
But that's kind of how I see my comics now. I see the back issues, because it's so much easier just to, here's Marvel Unlimited. I want to read Steve Englehart's Avengers run. Click.
So
flip,
so how many
flip.
how many are they in long boxes?
Yeah, and I have no idea.
Well, 20, 200.
Oh,
He had a
I know it's
wall
not
of
20.
I've seen his room. It was like a wall of long boxes. My question.
and remember, that was, 2001?
My question is, when you get the gumption to read like Hold Hands, Holly #12, do you know where it is, and can you find it right away?
Not anymore, not since it got moved to the storage unit.
Yeah.
Back then, I did have a filing system.
So they are in some order in the
Yeah.
in the box.
They were in alphabetical and numerical order,
Yeah.
with miniseries in a separate, miniseries I filed separately.
Yep.
And now, whatever.
Joe's looking for him even now. You find him?
I don't know where nothing is.
He can't find your books, Cory.
I can't find your book.
That's probably a good thing.
That's a good thing.
You've seen his prices.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somewhere
Good for the buyer.
in the piles here,
Sometimes.
I have a beer box. You remember when
You
I used
bet.
to buy bottles of beer? That used to hold my entire collection. I have the
Oh,
original
yeah.
box. Right now, I don't know what's in it. And now I've got
Probably some roaches.
hey, I just recently found out my new DC 52 #1s. I bought them when I was in Farmington, New Mexico. I went to a store called Hastings, and I lucked out because I ran into the guy who was putting out the comics. Because Hastings is like a huge, it's the closest thing we ever had here was Media Play. It was just like that.
Okay.
And they had one long rack of comics, and things were just haphazardly put there. And the nice thing about this guy is he got first crack at everything. So he got like all the hot variants and things like that.
Yeah.
But I told him, I'm just trying to catch the DC 52. Hey, no problem. I'll hold one of everything for you.
Wow.
So he got Justice League, and I got all the ones. And then by the time 2s came out, I was gone. I came back home.
Uh-huh.
So as I go through my collection, I've got all the DC 52s except the #1s, because they're in my pile of stuff that accumulated from Farmington,
The beer box.
wherever that is. And just recently I found them. Now they're all piled over there. Now I want to put them together because, as longtime listeners know, I don't like the DC New 52, so I'm just going to sell them on eBay. That's kind of like what I do.
I'm
Now.
not
If I don't
calling
like
it a
it,
good
I'm
jumping
selling
off
it. Oh, and see, this is a cliff, and the DC 52 way down here.
Sadly, the
listeners.
crickets are no longer exist, so they can't.
I can't
they
believe
can't chime in.
that I was even. I thought I would have been turned away after the crickets were killed because you would need them.
Yeah. Bastard. Rat bastard. Sorry.
I'm not the one who killed him.
Uh-huh.
Don't break kayfabe.
I think of all these great questions in the middle of the diatribes, and then I forget to make a note of it.
Yeah.
And so somewhere in there is a little divot where this great question
Here,
is
try this clothespin. No,
hiding.
I think, actually, I'll file my comics the way John Nunziata used to file his.
Yeah.
Be like, you'd be going through, here's a copy of, the latest Archie, here's a beat-up phone book. Hey, look, a mint copy of Amazing Spider-Man #1.
Right. Yeah,
You
you're
never know
looking
what
through
you'll
your
find.
stuff.
Yeah, whatever.
I thought
How much is it? Yeah, I know I had it around here somewhere.
Yeah. You find it.
Now, let me ask you, Butch.
I'm not on trial.
Oh, yes, you are. Tell me your first recollection
If that is your real name.
of Cory or I. Like, when was the first time, if you recall meeting us, or when it became like, yeah, I hang with these guys now?
It's not the convention where I bought the issue from Pat. That's something that had been lingering because every time I would look at that book, I would see Pat's writing on this big sticker, right?
Yeah.
And I would go, God, that's got to be Pat's writing, and I got to ask him about it. And then literally never did until just at this last convention, which was, March? April?
Yep.
And finally I thought of it, and it was kind of a cool moment because I asked him, I thought of asking him, and in between the thinking of it and the asking him, and I was standing right with him, I said, oh, Pat's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's just, which actually reminds me of one of my questions, or it's not a question so much as a comment, but it's amazing how, like you were saying, I was here and I bought these, I was there and I did this. I mean, you can flip, and I'm sure, I would hope the same is true with you, Cory, that you can flip through your comic collection and go, I was with these guys, this I bought there, and it really stands out. And it's funny how Pat was standing there talking about his 30th anniversary of conventioning, and I asked him a question from over 30 years ago, and we both are just snap. Know exactly what we're talking about. And then he went on to tell me the story about that book, too. He said, I got 5 of those from some guy, and I kept the best ones for myself, and I sold you the crappy.
Sold you the crappy one.
To paraphrase what Pat said. But my first recollection of you guys it's dim. Once I got to know you a little bit better, I remembered seeing you guys come in to St. Paul Comics on New Comic Day, which was Saturdays back then.
It might have been.
Oh, I didn't.
He could pick stuff up Friday. Because it was always Friday because I would pick up my paycheck at Sears, and depending on if I had a big paycheck from a holiday or extra work, I would go to the bank, drop off the extra. But I'd go from Sears across the ditch that is now 35E.
Yeah.
To John's, because you could cash your check at Sears, which was cool. And then I go to John's. Now, if I knew Gruber was coming, he would show up, and he'd be in his suit.
In his suit, yeah.
A big,
I
large
remember
guy
that.
wearing a business suit.
And I seem to remember him not having a beard yet.
No, he was very baby-faced.
Yeah.
And if we were meeting, then we'd get together. We would probably go to Schindler's on Wabasha.
And I'd be like, oh, God, here comes the Hells Angels. I'm out of here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because I was wearing jeans and whatever.
But you guys are older than me. So
Yeah.
you figure if I'm 14 years old, you were the, grown-ups.
Yeah,
big kids, big guys.
But
No, God, no.
We'd
Yeah,
go
I
to
know that now.
Schindler's, and then we'd go to probably eat at McDonald's, and then Pat'd go his way, I'd go my way.
Oh, the ritual. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
great. You
Every morning.
didn't know how great it was.
If
Cory,
Pat
you were going
wasn't with me, I would go then to the library, so I'd be coming home with a stack of comics. Keep them in shape.
Yeah, you don't want to bring
Library
Pat
books.
to the library or near any vegetables.
Nah. I'm good for colon.
Oh, no, keep that away from that. Cory, you were going to interject there?
Yeah, I know. I wasn't part of the Twin City Comics thing. I really didn't start hanging out with Joe till I left Schindler's in '92.
I wouldn't let him in the show.
And was there anyone else, Cory? I mean, because I swear I had comic book friends starting in 2nd grade and all the way through. I moved around a lot, but every school I went to, there were comic book reading kids, and it was Some more so than others. Some guys would go to conventions and go to the shops and buy them. Some just had a stack of 20 in their closet from when they were younger. But how about you? I mean, did you run into any other guys? I say guys, but I mean kids. Who?
I started reading Marvel because one of the kids on the bus went on and on and on and on and on about how great they were.
And he was
your typical Marvel zombie. I mean, if you even mentioned a DC hero, he'd go off on it.
Oh, Shogun Warrior, great.
And then in high school, there were a couple of people I knew who read comics, and we would play Dungeons and Dragons on the weekend. And then when I went to college, of course, we had the comic shop there, but it was more, I don't know of anybody who's kind of been in my life the whole time other than, my heterosexual life partner, Joe, who's kind of been a comic fan as well.
Yeah, well, I've got it.
It's more, I do this, and if someone in my life does it too, okay, but a lot of them eventually fade out. I still remember the one guy I was friends with in high school who'd spent all this time building his Avengers run. He wanted to have one of every Avengers book. And about 5 months after he built it, he sold all of his comics and quit collecting, just boom.
Uh-huh.
And when I read...
Woman's behind it, happened to Nicolas Cage.
Nope, he just got burned out. And when I'm on discussion lists for older comics, and I can't tell you how many people who are like, yeah, comics aren't any good since they went to 15 cents. Or once Kirby went to DC, I just quit reading them. They're all crap after that.
And can I assume you've never come close to getting burned out?
No.
Yeah, me either.
There are times when my interest isn't as big.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never been I'm stopping cold turkey, because I like that. There's something about the New Comic Day, except now it's New Comic Month, that I like. And there are certain characters that I just always follow. Like Spider-Man, I've never read a run of Spider-Man so bad that I went, I'm done. And there were some bad runs of Spider-Man. I'm looking at you, Denny O'Neil. I'm looking at you, Howard Mackey.
No name. I'm looking at you, Clone Saga.
Well, the Clone Saga was just this unbelievable mess, and it was a lot like watching an Ed Wood movie. You can't believe how horrible it's getting and how convoluted and messy. And no one who was involved in Spider-Man in the beginning of that story was there at the end of the story.
Oh, yeah. How long did that go on?
Why did it have to
a couple of years.
When that was sprung from a What If issue in maybe the late 70s, early 80s, where what if Spider-Man's clone had lived?
Well, they did that, but the main reason they did it,
yeah.
Once Jim Shooter was gone, they were like, we got to get rid of this marriage. We got to get rid of the Spider-Man marriage. We've just now anchored him down.
The married people are so boring.
It was more that, okay, if he's married, there are stories we can't do, and it ages the character a lot. It changes the type of story. And every creator who came on Spider-Man after the marriage kind of wanted to get rid of it.
But how?
Which is why when Quesada and JMS got rid of
we can't blow her up in a 747. Let's make a deal with the devil.
Well, Quesada was pretty much, okay, we've got to do this. I don't care how we do it, but we have to do it in a way we don't want Spider-Man to be a divorced guy. We don't want Mary Jane to die. If we do those things, the fans will, it won't work. Yeah. And that was almost the only solution for all of JMS's blowhard of how he was arm twisted into it and he hated writing it and he wanted his name off it. He's also said that he was gung-ho for it and he wanted to take everything back to before Gwen died. Jeez. So there were a lot of people who we've got to hit this reset button. And Joe and I have talked about it in the past. I don't think anybody, the only people who still are upset about it are people who are looking to be upset because, come on, it was, 5, 6, 7 years ago now?
Oh, yeah.
It was, it was a long time ago. And if you look, the whole Clone Saga was, all right, we'll get rid of the marriage without getting rid of the marriage by saying the guy who married Mary Jane wasn't really Spider-Man, and we'll put him off on the West Coast without any powers.
I'm shaking.
And then marketing came in and stretched it out for extra years. And then John Byrne and Howard Mackey said, well, we'll make it seem like she's dead. And then JMS was, actually, if you read his early issues, Mary Jane's not in them because Kevin Smith was supposed to do the story that kind of took care of the marriage. But we all know Kevin Smith and deadlines get along about as well as me and bacon on a cheeseburger.
It's still not done.
So eventually,
boy, for a guy not
JMS
married,
is
he
gonna
certainly got
finish
a lot to say about it.
when JMS was going to end it, they said, all right, let's do this to clean the slate and give Spider-Man a whole new start.
Whole new start. We'll bring Harry back, too.
And I think it was successful sales-wise. Spider-Man's still at the top of the charts. The people who bellyache about it probably wouldn't buy Spider-Man anyway if there was a creative change of some kind. And I don't know. There have been worse decisions.
Than the dissolution, than the Mephisto deal?
Yeah.
Worse than that?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I'm not one to get too shaken up about what happens in comics. A nice cover Joe got.
I got an original comic cover. It's one of those blank covers we were talking about.
Doesn't look like it.
And comic artist Tom Beelan, who I've raved about, he did a story called True Story, Swear to God. He's doing a living right now off of eBay.
Yeah, I read that.
By doing comic covers.
He is, huh?
And this is from the Secret Wars one. Amazing Spider-Man, Renew Your Vows. Who's got Mary Jane flipping the finger off to Mephistophelies. And he's got his back to her, just kind of like, yeah, whatever.
Yep, and it's a very cartoon-style drawing. It's very complete.
Oh, yeah.
Inked,
he did
colored,
an awesome job on
and
this.
I would believe there was 100,000 of these in print. I mean, it doesn't look like an original.
No, it looks like it's real. And you can check him out on Facebook because he's on his eBay stuff, and he'll probably do commissions too. But it's just funny you guys talking about that, and this is just something I just picked up. He had some money problems. He goes, I normally sell these for $70, but I'm going $40. I'm like, I'll take this one.
Oh, yeah, good move. But I can't get mad about comic books. I like them too much.
There are times I get mad. There are times you get really passionate. Although I have a different feel about it. Back in the 90s, the Tom DeFalco, Paul Ryan run on the Fantastic Four.
It was great.
I would read every issue, and it would make me more and more angry until I have a complete run of the Fantastic Four from issue 100 up. I can't, I will not buy this anymore. And I was so upset. But then after that kind of broke the dam where it's like, you know what? Bob Harris on Avengers blows. I don't care if I have 400 issues in a row. I'm not buying this anymore.
That's hard to crack because there were times.
It was.
When Marvel came out with the graphic novel, the magazine size format, Death of
Square Bound.
Death of Captain Marvel. I bought each and every one. Mm-hmm. And Marvel, same thing, Marvel Super Special. I bought each and every one. You don't know how geamed I was or how upset I was when I found out it was number 5, the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie. Never published or never released in the U.S. So I had a hole in my collection I've never filled. And to this day, I have no idea if it's ever been published. I've never seen
it. Has not been published in the U.S.
Yeah, and I've never seen a non-U.S. copy.
I have seen the French version.
So, I mean...
But then again, I've seen the movie Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't want an adaptation of that god-awful piece of dog shit. I don't care if it was drawn by George Perez.
You don't know how hard it was for me to break that habit of, okay, I have every graphic novel. I have to keep buying.
Yep, you got to keep the streak alive.
Sometimes it just happens to you.
And to get out of that thinking, I'll give you an example. Like, I've reassembled Kurt Busiek's run on the second volume of Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
And when he left, it went to hell until the disassembled issues where they canceled and then gave it to Bendis. And to this day, I look at my run and I go, oh, why did I stop here? Oh, yeah. Don't need them. Don't want them. And that is a hard habit to break.
It's maturity or something.
Well, it's a different way of looking at your collection.
Yeah.
Where I'm not gonna worry so much about having the whole thing, because there was also this, well, what if it gets better? Well, if it gets better, then I can buy the back issues. I'm not going to worry that I'll miss out. I've missed out on tons of comics because I don't have time to read everything. I don't have money to read everything. You kind of have to decide, all right, here's what I'm going to spend my non-work time on.
Well, the market's changed a lot, too. I mean, it used to be, if you missed an issue, you were screwed. You either waited for a con and bought it, or you bought it as a back issue for a quarter. The idea of going to another comic store was pretty foreign, especially as a kid, because you didn't know where the hell they were.
I didn't feel like I needed to.
Yeah, sometimes you didn't need to. Sometimes they, if you missed last issue, here's what happened this issue. Nowadays with eBay and, quarter boxes and, I can drive to any of the comic stores in town. And when I'm traveling places, I always look to see if there's a comic store within spitting distance that I can visit. Cory and I talked about that earlier. We think if we were to run a comic store again, that would be one of the things we would do, is to work the back issues hard. You would know if you're looking for a certain issue, you could come get it. And Mile High does that in a way too.
Just the most complete run of back issues.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Kind of leaving no stone unturned. Don't ask me why, because apparently nobody's looking for 80% of the stuff that we thought was so cool.
And that's what makes it that's what makes it tougher if somebody's not looking for something. I kid a lot on eBay, but I recently sold a couple no-name back issues that were done during the black and white glut in the 90s. And I told the guys, I started at 99 cents, and I said, hey, I'm shipping this for free. If you want it, it's yours. I mean, I'm going to lose money on it, but if you really want it, sold both of them too.
And that's the end of that story.
Actually, I'm trying to find a picture of Mile High Comics. They have they converted their warehouse into a store.
Yeah.
So I've heard, yeah.
See if I...
Now, one of the things about that is he wants to have everything. Now, the good thing is he has everything. The bad thing is, because he's probably the only one who has it, hey, I need Strawberry Shortcake published by Marvel #7. We got it. $50.
This is like we're looking at pictures on Google. This is like Nirvana. This is like the new place I've got to hit.
It's a permanent convention.
I mean, it is. It's just huge. Look at these books. These are all dollar books. These are rare comics.
I literally could just set up under that table and
just
live there.
read. I mean, and then Cory comes in, you put him through one of them. I still have no idea how that table broke.
Neither do I. Cory, do you remember?
Oh, no.
Tell the story.
Story time.
Is Joe going to be listening?
I'm going to look for that comic box again.
He still won't know.
I won't know.
We've got it's Joe's last day, and we're packing stuff and taking down stuff, and we're taking down the wall books. And you and I were both on the ladder taking down wall books. And we get all the wall books down, and we're still on the ladder, and we look, and there's this one table with nothing on it near the ladder. And we look at each other, and I just kind of do the head bob toward the table. And the next thing you know, we're fake punching each other. Like we're Steve Austin and The Rock going at it. We do that a few times, and then I don't remember if it was either you or me, shoves off from the wall. The ladder tips, and we go through the table.
I literally have no recollection. I must have hit my head.
Well, no, the ladder broke it. We just went, and boom! And we're laughing ourselves sick, and then we go, we better clean this up before Joe gets back. So we gather up all the pieces, and I remember we had to go out the front because the back door was, unpassable.
Mm-hmm.
We gather up the pieces, sweep everything up because Joe was out.
Like a couple.
It's the last day, and he's gone for like an hour.
I gotta go get gas. I needed gas.
And we get it all in the dumpster. We're back in, and Joe comes back in, and we both just kind of, went about our business, made no mention of anything. And then at the after party, at the after party, every so often, you and I would just crack up. And Joe go, "What are you guys laughing about?" "Nothing." Of course, the after party was such a nightmare because it was impossible to get Joe to get in the car to go with us.
I don't want to go.
Well, it was a surprise party. So we're like, "Hey, Joe, we're going to all go, grab some pizza after Joe." "No, I just want to go home."
I was depressed. It was kind of sad.
Yeah. And Chris was so mad at you. That's why Chris kept going outside. Because it's like, we got to get him there. And I said, "Don't worry about it. We'll get him there." And I would come up with something to get you in someone else's car, and you would just knock it down. And then you probably don't remember, but Chris would storm outside and then come back in after she calmed down a little
Hard to
bit.
tell. Normal behavior. Even now she's upstairs. Like, "Hi, Chris." She stormed outside.
Yeah, she won't come down and talk to him.
Nope, never.
Would you?
No. She's very wise beyond her years.
Years.
Oh, by the way.
What other questions you got for us, Butch?
What questions do I have?
You never answered what was your first recollection of Cory. Was it just someone hanging at the shop?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I didn't get to the Cory thing. I barely got to the Pat and Joe thing. Cory was from the MCBA, from the comic book convention. Everybody outside of Hot Comics, everyone who's anyone, was the comic book convention. You couldn't help. Well, I guess people could. I would go there. I don't think I even started this way, but I ended up going to the convention, kind of in the spirit of like glad handing everybody. I wanted to go and, oh my God, these are my people. These people love comics, and in a lot of cases we were all kind of peers, in the same age group, and with great senses of humor and things, and I really enjoyed the company, so I wanted to get to know everybody. And that's where I started to get to know Cory. Cory I got to know much better because he started to come to your shop, and he wasn't the only one. A lot of the guys that came to the shop came from 30, 40 miles away.
Yeah. Well, I made a deal with them when Pat and I first had the shop going. We said, "Guys, we'll make a deal. If you guys come to the shop, we'll cut you a 40% discount."
Well, that would have got me there, but I was within walking distance.
Yeah.
So I guess.
I stopped by Subway, grab some.
That would explain why I was there like 30 hours a week.
Except when Mary was looking for you, then you'd be gone. Butch there? Never.
Actually, most of the time, yeah, that I was.
The best was when she would call and like, "Is Butch there?" "Oh, no, he isn't." And she'd be like, that was the only place she could think.
He might be en route.
He's en route. He's en route. I got a question for you, Butch.
Yes.
How did you get involved with Dan, Brian? Or how did you find Hot Comics?
I've known Brian since I was about 11 years old.
Brian, of course, being the founder of
Brian,
Hot
the
Comics,
guy who basically started Hot Comics, yeah.
So you were in on the ground floor.
I was, in on the ground floor. I mean, you remember, well, how did you find him?
Pat came up to me one day and goes, "Oh, there's this new comic store on White Bear Avenue."
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, "Really? Where?" "Oh, it's behind the Instaprint down the hallway."
Right. So you found them when the first year when they were down in the closet, as we call it.
And it was like, we'd go to John's, we might go talk to Brian, but we were definitely on our way to Schindler's, and then we go get pizza at Angelo's.
Yep. Yeah, but it was such a small shop, and I was a big, Brian and Dan basically, if I'm understanding this right, opened that store on the strength of Transformers, G.I. Joes, and Star Wars toys.
Because he had the most remarkable collection of Transformers. Because I was like a big thing in college, my buddies and I. And when we found these, we were like, "Dude, we got to come here. These guys got Transformers too."
Yeah, and Dan was the comic guy. And there was, it being such an early startup, he'd get like 2 issues of a comic on the shelf, and they'd be all wrinkled up and stuff. So I was still going to St. Paul Comics, and to a greater degree, Schindler's up in
they were just up the road
Mall,
a couple miles.
Because they had a pretty good stock of comics. But eventually, I I just started buying all my stuff at Hot Comics too.
That's when Pat and when John, St. Paul Comics, stopped carrying new comics. And he did carry comics for one person. I wasn't sure if it was Jim Thole or somebody else, but he said he wasn't going to deal with any new stuff. He just wanted to deal with old stuff. Because, I mean, he was making money on selling Karl Barks prints, selling Timmy toys.
Right. He moved into antiques and
time.
other collectibles.
He told me one thing, and I don't know if it's separate, Pat, but he said you can either do new stuff really well or old stuff really well. He said the problem is the cash flow of the two are different, and if you sell an old book, that cash is going to go into the new comics, which is why he decided just to go with old stuff. And that was something I think why our store did as well as it did, because we just concentrated on new stuff. Pat and I didn't go to Hot Comics when it became apparent that we were not going to actually be buying from John. We actually had comic shops coming to us saying, hey, we want your business, because they knew of us from the con circuit. They knew we bought in bulk. There'd be times like Greg Ketter would give Al Payne the permission to blow out his stock, and Pat and I would go buy $500 worth of back stock and stuff. We went with Brian and Dan because of their discount. You know, we qualified for a 30% discount through them, and I remember we got to go with that.
It had at the time it had a sense of a feeling like a dam burst. You know, like you guys were coming in and you were big customers, and it was a big deal, and a lot of others too because of the St. Paul Comics situation. And I was already out of there by then because Hot Comics was established enough.
Yeah, and close.
Yeah. Actually, it was already running when I bought my house about a quarter mile away.
Yeah.
So yeah,
perfect.
It was easy. And but Cory, did you just come from Schindler straight to Hot Comics, or was there a lapse in there where you were going somewhere else?
No, I was already working with the MCBA. And Joe actually wanted me to come over so I could spill beans on Schindlers.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So were you still with Schindlers, or you just had your bandolero full of ammunition?
I left Schindlers, I think it was either June or July, because I realized that as long as I was there, I was never, I was a store manager, but you were still kind of an employee. I had crap hours. I was getting paid $7.25 an hour, and I saw that they were going through, and if you weren't an expert at baseball cards, once you made over $7 an hour, you were kind of in the danger zone. And I figured, you know what? I'll leave now when the group home has tons and tons of hours, and use that time to look for a new job where I could, wear real shoes.
Yeah, and what was your plan for buying comics at the time? Staying at Schindler's with your 5% discount card?
No, Joe had already said,
okay.
Hey, you could join Pat and I.
Okay.
We order our stuff, blah, 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 blah. So I kind of did
right.
that.
That's right. I remember now.
And then when Joe opened his shop, I'd already told him about all sorts of stuff Schindler's did behind the scenes. I don't know if it ever helped his shop or not, but he had an understanding of how they did business and kind of how he could kind of make inroads into their customers. The one line at Schindler's I always remember, when I was working with the convention, the upper management was really kind of pissy about it. And they actually said, we don't want our customers to know about other shops or conventions, because once they find out there are other shops, they don't buy from us anymore. We want our customers to remain stupid.
All right, Butch, another question for you.
Me.
What?
Yeah, because we're interviewing Butch on this
see how we turned? We turned it on you?
Well, maybe since my well of questions it hasn't dried up, but it has left the vicinity, maybe it'll trigger something.
Well, actually, what is your recollection when Pat and I bought Hot Comics? I mean, what was obvious? I mean, you're looking at it you just come in whenever.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, I wasn't going anywhere, Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that Dan and Brian sold to you and just went ahead and moved on to another location, right? Across town.
Yeah, they went to Edina.
And I had, like I said, I'm walking distance from your shop, and I certainly wasn't going anywhere. So much like an old refrigerator in the back room, I just came with the place.
True.
You know, and I was always there.
Was there, I mean, did you hear anything? Was it like, they're buying it, or, they're buying it, or whatever?
I don't remember, because my mind doesn't really, and man, I mean, I'm older now and a little bit wiser, but man, was I aloof back then. All I cared about was superheroes, jumping around and acting like an idiot.
Oh.
And I didn't latch on to any of the, like, sensation that went along with a big deal, like a shop changing hands.
That was a pretty cool year, though, because we went to 2 cons, including the Image tent.
Yes. Yeah.
At the end of the year, Pat and I had bought the shop,
yeah.
which I'd have had no frickin' clue at the beginning of the year we would have done.
I got that house that I talk about living nearby. I still live there. On October 13th of 1992. Right.
Oh, so you were a little
right
occupied
before you guys bought the shop.
Because we took over
like November 1st, wasn't it?
Yeah, because then the Superman Death issue came out.
The Death of Superman. Yeah.
Were you at the shop when that?
Oh
hit?
God, yeah.
See, because I was telling
all
Cory
the way
about
up
this.
The whole thing.
It was like what my recollection is. Okay, Brian ran the till. I was doing subscriptions. There was a steady stream of people. They were coming in, taking a right, grabbing the book, walking around, going out. Subscribers, we'd give them their books. Dan was being interviewed by some lady from one of the news organizations.
That's right.
I don't know where Gruber was, if he was off that day or if he was there. And I'm pretty sure, like, you were there, Jess, Dave.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was just running back and forth like a monkey at the circus.
Oh, yeah.
Escaped a monkey at the circus.
It was crazy. It was to time travel. That would be a day to time travel to, just to see that day, because it was a crazy day just for comics all across. And to open the first week we owned the shop, that was nuts.
Yeah, that was unbelievable.
That was cool.
If you took it November 1st, how many days until the death of Superman? New Comic Day. Wednesday or Friday still at that
I thought it was Thursday.
They jerked around quite a bit.
Because we were getting...
In that period.
We were getting news reports that it was already out in New York.
Ooh.
The day before.
Ooh.
And so we were taking calls like, hey, you're going to have them? You're going to have them? We want 25 copies. And it's like, we're limiting to 1.
Do you got them on that name?
Although anybody who ordered more than that got it. I think Pat, he was buying for his own investment, and he was covered. I talked, oddly enough, we talked about this last episode. Dan, with all his foresight, there were 2 things Dan did that was absolutely incredible.
He was on the ball.
First one with the Death of Superman, he ordered a huge reorder through Diamond.
Yeah.
And the problem why people didn't order through Diamond previews at the time was, first of all, Advanced Comics was Cap City. They were in town. So you went and picked up the books.
Right.
Second thing, previews would UPS them, and that's shipping cost.
Mm-hmm.
So you would only order things to reorder. Dan ordered an ungodly amount of numbers for reorders. So when everybody else was sold out, we just got our reorders. They grabbed a bunch. They threw them in the window at their new shop. So people were like, I got to get in. But even before the X-Men cartoon, which was the other big thing that happened that fall, he locked everybody else out. We were the only comic store that could advertise exclusively. And he had that set up way out in April before anybody else had that on their radar.
Was he working on the cartoon at that point? He did work
on the cartoon. He was on the first season. No, he was on the first season.
Huh?
Yeah.
I used to know this stuff, but it's hard to actually remember. Cory, I got to ask, where were you when Superman died?
I was at Joe's shop.
You were there too, huh?
Yep. Now that I actually went through in '92, November 1st was a Sunday.
It was like a guest appearance.
Yeah. November 1st was a Sunday, and what it was, comics you could pick them up on Thursday afternoon from the Cap City warehouse.
My God, he remembers this.
And Friday morning is when most shops would have them, because I remember the College of Comic Book Knowledge would actually put them out late on a Thursday. But most shops would go pick them up
on Friday.
And then have them there and ready to go Friday morning. And at Schindler's, I told Joe, here's how you beat Schindler's. The main store gets them, and then later in the morning or even early afternoon is when they put them in the vans and drive them out to the 13 different stores. You get them up on the shelf, you're going to beat Schindler's because Schindler's won't have them yet. And I don't think the college was still doing the put them out on Thursday night. I think there was something about the comic companies got a little pissy about that and wanted everything to be New Comics Friday.
But they couldn't enforce it. Unlike now.
They couldn't enforce it, but with the warehouse in the Twin Cities, they did have people who would go to stores, and they wouldn't tell you not to do it, but they would, they wouldn't say, stop it or else, but they would say, Marvel and DC really aren't happy when you do this. And I do have to report things like this when it comes to co-op dollars.
I don't know if that happened. Yeah, co-op they could nail you on. But Cap City here was only a two-man operation. So unless they dragged somebody in from Madison, and like you said, it was 5 o'clock Thursday was pickup time. It used to be 6 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And
was that Thursday?
No, it would have been Friday.
Friday, yeah.
Because there were times where I would pick up Pat, we'd pick up the comics, I'd give him a ride downtown Minneapolis, bring them back and process them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that always made a cluster. I remember sometimes distinctly where it would be like, okay, I busted my ass, I got in line first, I paid the comics, I got them, I threw them in the truck. As I drove away, a big-ass rainstorm hit. Yeah. And everybody else was stuck because they didn't want to bring their boxes out in the rain. And I'm like, on my way back to the shop with them. But by the time
then hauled them in the shop in the rain,
you could get them out. I don't recall if I had people coming in Thursday night, because I think for the most part, they're like, guys, I wouldn't have time to process them. Yeah. By the time, we closed at 8.
It took several hours to go through the books and put them out. Which is,
and as the store got bigger, it got even. I mean, there'd be times we'd be open at 11, and remember, Randy Nelson was always the first person in. Yep. We let him grab his books. He left. Everybody else would come in 12, 1 o'clock, and we were still putting stuff out by 4. Mostly smaller press, toys.
Yeah, the comics would get done first, and then Joe would be working on the toys for hours.
Oh, yeah.
And I would have lost interest and been on my way up to the pizza.
You would have had your pizza and you're gone.
Yeah. Well, I was never gone, though.
Here's your $20. We'll see you later.
Yeah.
So what's our next question? Where are we going from here?
This is the next question. How have your, maybe that's jumping, maybe that's the tail end of what I'm thinking. Were your morals influenced by what you were reading on the printed page? And I guess I asked that question because I was, at first, mostly a superhero junkie, and they always tried to do the right thing, although, they didn't do such a good job at it. Thor has no business handling that hammer, if you ask me, But, I was, I even, by the time I was maybe in high school, I had what I labeled a Superman complex. You didn't pick on the kids weaker than you, and you helped the people, you held the door for the old ladies, and not that that's, Superman's deal, but I always tried to do the upstanding, rah, USA apple pie thing, and be a good boy.
2 instances come to mind when you say that, and the question, I'd have to say yes, it is, because I mean, even now, I'll look through, unfortunately, Facebook, and I'll see things, and you're like, if I only had superhero powers, I'd take care of that. But there were a couple of things that happened in school. One of them, there was this girl being picked on.
How can that even happen? I mean,
I know, it was just everybody ganged up on her.
Girl,
She had a mouth on her, but it was to the point where they were just. I remember telling them one girl, just back off, just. And she's like, whoa, and she was so incensed. Later that day, one of her friends comes screaming at me as I'm at the locker, and the teacher came running out of the room and like threw himself between us, and she walked away, and he just looked at me, and I'm like, I have no idea. 2 hours later, happened again. Another girl come screaming up at me because and this time not only did that teacher get in the way, but the principal stuck his head out, and he's looking at me like, Mr. Ryder, what is going on? I said, I don't know. The next day, I talked to the original girl who got pissed at me. He said, hey, I don't care if you 1-on-1 with her, but you're 5-on-1. I don't like that. Mm-hmm. Just don't. Mm-hmm.
They needed to read the comic books.
I talked earlier about my buddy Dave, the one who knew martial arts.
Okay.
This happened at the U of M. We're walking through the various tunnel systems, and imagine if you were like a long hallway. And at the end of the hallway, there's this guy just whooping ass on a student. We just hear you.
Wow. Wow.
And hear Dave tell it, he said, I was off like a shot rushing this guy. And it was a long run. And Dave was behind me. And I'm thinking in my mind, I say, okay, what the hell am I going to do when I get to this guy? I said, well, Dave's behind me. He's got my back. As I got closer, the guy saw me and he stopped hitting the student and he just backed up. And by that time, I realized it was this homeless guy been wandering around. And he's like, I'm going to kill you. And I just looked up and said, keep walking, man. Gonna kill you. Keep walking. And then his eyes just kind of like shifted gears and he took off. And, I'm looking around and people are on the phone calling the police and doing this and doing that, which is always dumb. I'm going to call the cops while this guy's getting beat in front of me. A couple minutes, we talked to the guy, we pick him up saying, you doing okay? He goes, yeah, do you want to wait for the cops? No, I want to get out of here. Okay. So then some kids come down from the upper levels. Oh, what's going on? Oh, this homeless guy was beating this guy up. Blah, blah, blah. Where'd he go? And I'm like, I don't want to point these kids at the homeless guy. Yeah. So I pointed a different direction. They ran up. And later on I see the Daily had a thing about, this attack was by this homeless guy. We got information. So I called the cops, said what I saw. So yeah, it does affect me. I mean, this was in the 80s when all this shit happened. Nowadays, you would think, well, is this guy going to shoot me? Is he going to knife me?
Yeah.
It probably still wouldn't stop me.
It just should stop me.
It should. It might give me pause. Nowadays, you're more apt to take out the cell phone and just take pictures and then turn it over to the cops or something. So yeah, it does affect me. I like to think in a black and white terms. I'm not naive enough to know the world is black and white.
Yeah.
I think that's why the current run of comics with that Hickman's writing kind of appeals to me, because a lot of the heroes, they're doing things they wouldn't normally do.
Right.
And Cory and I go round and round about this, whether, should Superman kill or would Spider-Man do that? And that's probably why I think I enjoy stories more like that. I'm intrigued by what Cory always says, because there always should be a way that the hero does not have to kill. He should be able to figure it out. It's just a lot of times when I see the storyline, I'm like, the way they wrote the story, I don't see how it is. It's one thing to just say that, but.
Yeah, I never see it either. I just figure I'm not smart enough.
And I'm not a writer either,
And we hearken from the halcyon days of the 1970s where we didn't have to worry about that. Things always got wrapped up.
Believe it or not, we're walking on air. Kudos to anybody who gets that reference.
Well, that was great.
Well, Jen's not here to yell at me for singing, so.
I'm certainly not going to.
Your turn, Cory. How does comics affect your morals? And I'm not talking the Howard the Duck morals. I'm talking.
I grew up, as I've said, in the middle of nowhere. There were no
morals,
ethnic people of any kind at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading Marvel stuff, and every so often Stan Lee would, have one of his, where he would take a stand that prejudice and bigotry are bad, or things like that. But also in the stories themselves, especially the writers that I really enjoyed, they were putting their philosophy into the stories. And I was at an age where that was really, really, really influential. And it really affected both my worldview and how I see things, to the point where don't do the math. About 10 years ago, I read a long interview with Marv Wolfman, where he talked about the behind the scenes battles for certain stories and certain things he wanted to do and everything. And I thought about how he and other writers kind of influenced me to, I honestly can't understand why someone's prejudiced against a religion or a race or a group or anything like that. It's not that, I think those people are bad. I can't comprehend it in the same way I can't comprehend quantum physics like Neil deGrasse Tyson does. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. And I wrote Marv Wolfman an email that said, I want to thank you for fighting every one of those battles, because you influenced how I see the world, how we're supposed to take care of each other and not tear each other down. And Joe and you have both known me for a long time. When you first met me, I was this very bitter, cynical, angry person, and a lot of my humor derived from that.
Hated it.
Oh, God. Remember we used to
But over the years, I've moved toward the positive mental attitude thing. But it comes from that base that people like Don McGregor and Steve Gerber and Doug mentioned, Stan Lee and Len Wein, all put in their books of not just, all people have problems and all people need help, but also that everyone, even the villains, have a reason for what they're doing. And if we kind of figure out the reason, maybe we could communicate better. But it was also that Jim Starlin put this in all of his stories. Everyone's the hero of their own story.
Yeah,
Thanos thinks he's the good guy. The Magus thinks he's the good guy. Pip the Troll thinks he's the good guy. Warlock thinks he's the good guy. And then one other thing on top of it, I was always a kid who worried a lot and was, very concerned, and I worried about everything. And everybody else seemed like they didn't have that problem. But I read these Marvel comics, and Spider-Man's worried about making the rent, and he's worried about this, and he worries all the time, and he's, very anxious, and a lot of the Marvel heroes had that going on. And it helped me feel like, okay, I'm not alone in this. Maybe this isn't how I want to be, but these characters feel the same way. And it's one of the things why I think the X-Men was so big for certain groups of people, hated and hunted by a world that they're sworn to protect. But it's also, if you feel different, if you feel weird, if you feel like you don't fit in, and yet you still want to be part of it, there's an X-Men character that speaks to you. If you're a very neurotic person who feels like things fall apart for you all the time, Spider-Man works as a character for you. Or if you're not the smartest kid in the class and you're not an athlete, and then the Richard Rider Nova speaks to you. And it's why I think they have so much trouble with Superman, because they've gotten away from that part of Superman that speaks to people, which is Superman is this perfect character, but Clark Kent is rejected and not really, he's kind of a nebbish and a schlub.
Damn you, Steve Lambert.
And the underlying theme is, well, if they knew who I really was, if they knew I was really Superman, they'd like me because they like Superman. And how many of us in this life haven't said, if this girl or this person or this boss or this whatever really knew who I was, they would accept me and like me.
If I made it in the movies, all the girls who said no to me in high school would wish they'd have said yes.
That's right.
But I think it's more basic than that. It's, what, if you really knew who I was, you wouldn't make fun of me, you wouldn't bully me, you wouldn't treat me like this, you wouldn't ignore me. So there's always these things that speak to us through the characters. And a lot of my morality came from that, in that, we have to help each other. Spider-Man was willing to do whatever it took to save that innocent bystander. Well, except for Gwen.
Snap.
We all make mistakes. I think Cory just went Stacy dead.
And it's why the dark and gritty stuff, while it was interesting, I think it caused a lot of people to kind of step away from comics, because there wasn't that self-identification anymore. It was that, well, if I had a lot of power, I'd kill people.
Yeah.
Whereas before that, it was, if I had a lot of power, I'd help people. It speaks to the better part of us rather than the darker part of us.
Wow, good answer.
Thank you.
Oh, that? Yeah. No,
I have my moments.
Usually they're in the shower, but we don't talk about that. I'll show you the NSA tapes later. Yeah,
boy, that'll throw a guy. I feel sorry for the feel sorry maybe putting into a cliched of a term, but you know, there are kids that grew up and felt similarly to that and didn't have comic books. You know, they didn't find that. Maybe they found something else, but boy, maybe some of the failures are as a result of people who just didn't fit in and never found a way, their own thing.
So you're saying Dick Cheney should have had comic books as a kid?
I was going to bring Dick Cheney up just now, but you stomped all over it.
Sorry,
Yeah,
anyway.
right.
I was reading your...
I think it's a little different from that. I think there's an old Zen saying of, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Mm-hmm.
Harlan Ellison once said in one essay that people would come up to him and go, when I read this story, I was going to commit suicide, and then I read the story and I decided to live. And he thanks them, but he knows in his heart that they would, if it wasn't his story, it would have been something else.
It would have been a stop sign or a rainy day or something. Yeah.
When you're looking for morality or a way to live life or whatever, you're searching. And some people find it in religion, some people find it in other sorts of fiction. But I think that when you're searching for something, you're going to find it somewhere.
Most of them,
or you just keep looking.
Yeah, they certainly find it without comic books.
Still haven't
Most of them.
What I'm looking for. But I got a flashlight, so this will help.
I know that, I hope that some of this has been interesting. I feel like I've missed about 80% of what interesting things that we could have touched on. But I know...
we could do another one, because we haven't even got to the ending of the shop, the second shop, or this podcast at all.
And if I go think on this, I could come up with some... a lot of what we've talked about ties into a lot more questions.
Well, and you're talking, like, different things will come to mind. Remember this point or
Absolutely.
Remember that point?
Would it make sense to ask, this almost sounds like a real question, and it was something I was thinking for the end of the show. What is your vision for this podcast? Are you looking at 200 more episodes in 5 more years? Is there anything you hope to accomplish that you feel like you've just scratched the surface of? And that kind of thinking, is that a 20-minute answer type question, or is that something that you could go, well, basically it's this?
Well, I'll let Joe answer, because I have a long answer.
Go for it, Cory.
I'm glad to hear you have a long answer.
Because you're doing the hard part. You go ahead, Cory.
All right.
A long answer in a nutshell.
When I started this podcast, I had a very different vision than Joe. I was a huge fan of WrestleCrap Radio, and I wanted to be sort of like a comic version of that, where we would talk about crappy comics, and we would have bits and characters and stuff.
I'm in.
And Joe immediately squashed it in his very passive-aggressive Minnesotan way by just not going along with it at all.
I don't spend time on crappy comics.
Yeah, no, that negativity just doesn't breed fun
even
for
when
me
you
the
go
way
back
it does for everyone else.
I think it breeds fun, but it was the stuff about, doing the character bits and doing prepared bits, and Joe just wouldn't do the prep.
Hated it.
And I don't know if he did it on purpose or if he just didn't want to put in the work, but it moved us more toward...
Potato.
It moved us more toward telling stories, not just about the shop and not just about what we're doing now and but really kind of talking about our lives. And by the end of the first year, I kind of realized that why I enjoy podcasting and why I enjoy this podcast in particular is twofold. One is I'm a storyteller, and I love to tell a story. Whenever I get started, Joe will go, "Oh, good, story time." Yeah. And I hope I'm good at it. I hope people enjoy it.
As long as my mute button holds out, we're going to keep having stories.
But the second part of it is, it's why I've become kind of this podcast evangelical person, where I think everybody should at least try, or people should be on podcasts. And that is, you're sitting around talking with your friends.
Yeah, big time.
Sometimes in a structured environment. But what's better than that to help connect people to each other? one of the problems I have with a lot of media now is it's so splintered and so big, you don't have that sense of community anymore. And with PW Insider, I've often emailed the guys and said, you guys are like the corner bar where you sit around with friends and talk wrestling and other stuff. And when Comic Geek Speak was at its peak, it's, you know what, we're fans who really like comics because a lot of places on the internet that cover comics complain about it all the time. With this, I've kind of created a way to record my life and Joe's life and to bring in people that I really care about.
Yeah.
I do the solo podcast because there's all this information in my head that I want to kind of get out there. I'm loving doing the audio biography of Jack Kirby. I love when I interview somebody who's not a big name, who has an interesting story.
Yeah.
My favorite interview I've done.
Nutter.
Nutter was close.
Not even your favorite, huh?
Brown,
It was a good one.
Cassie Brown, who I worked with at the movie theater, who after she got out of college went into AmeriCorps.
Oh, okay.
And just asking her, well, what do you do? What's it like? Why did you do this? What do you want to do from here? With Nutter, it was very much, I want to introduce you to my friend. I've said it on the Facebook page innumerable times. The three closest people in the world to me are Joe, Dan Moore, and Jin Wicked. They're the closest people on the planet to me. And Butch, you're there too, but it's been so long, we've kind of got to reconnect.
Yeah, I'm just out of the loop.
But think about the fact that I get to sit down with my closest friends every week and talk with them about things and share that with the world. Introducing the people who listen to the show to Jin Wicked and her art. Introducing the people on this show who listen to this show to Dan Moore and his sense of humor and his creations. Introducing the people on the show to Joe and Joe's life and what Joe is like, not just the persona, but who he is behind the scenes. My God, is there anything better?
It's pretty great. It's hard for me to articulate, but as a listener to the show and a Johnny-come-lately to the show, and yet an old friend, I can just flip it on at home when there's nothing else going on, good cooking or something, you know, and I'm there, you know. I'm not here with you guys, but because you're not strangers to me, I'm just listening to my friends go, you know, and Joe cracks me up every time. I mean, just running out of the room screaming and singing, you know, obscure pop culture songs and stuff. Yeah, well, it's hilarious, and like I said, it's hard for me to express. I'd have to really sit down and put it into the right words, but I'm definitely a target for your efforts. You know, a good target for a bullseye. I really enjoy it. And thanks to Little Mike for turning me on to the show.
He's listening? Little Mike?
Yeah, he turned me on to it.
Oh, Little Mike. Hey, contact me. We got to talk.
There's one other thing I want to add, because every so often I sit and I actually do the math. We've recorded over, I would say, at least 350 to 400 hours of audio. And just think about one of my nieces, who I don't have contact with, said, I want to get to know you. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? We could sit and we could talk, and we'll talk for about an hour or so. But you can listen to over 200 hours of me talking about my life. Or when my son, if he ever has a grandkid, after I'm gone, there'll be hundreds and hundreds of hours. Mm-hmm. Or Joe's daughters, when they have children, hundreds and hundreds of hours. Just think how cool it would be if your grandparent or your great-grandparent or your great-great-grandparent had recorded hours and hours and hours of them talking about their life.
Yeah, they almost seem like non-entities to us.
Because we don't have that connection.
Right.
And the people who listen to the show who don't know Joe and I, who've become super fans, I don't think there's a way I can express how much that makes me feel just sort of proud of what we built. Mm-hmm. There are people who listen to the show who don't read comics, who don't know comics, but they still listen because they enjoy the stories that we're telling. And I can't think of a better job in the world to sit down with my heterosexual life partner every week and shoot the breeze.
Not in these shorts.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And the fact that Jen has become part of the show, I know that it's a little weird that she's on a lot.
She hates comics.
But I can't explain how much she has been a part of my life for so long. And much like Butch, she was gone for a long time and came back.
Aren't you lucky?
And I'm the luckiest human being on the planet that people have come back. And it's not a, where have you been? You need to explain yourself. It's no.
Well,
that's not what I'm like. It's, oh my God, I'm so glad you're back.
yeah, that's cool. And that much.
So there you go. Not a lot of jokes in that rant, are there?
I tried. No.
Well, kids,
Wait,
believe it or not.
before we go, I have to give Butch a parting gift. Here is your personalized copy, a DVD of Rescue from Gilligan's Island.
Oh, thank goodness. I was
for your
afraid it
trouble.
would be one of the sequels to Rescue from
Yeah,
Gilligan's
no,
Island.
I only give you the best.
Yeah, I'd never be able to watch it.
Wait,
until I
what
started
about the
reading.
Harlem Globetrotters go to Gilligan's
Yeah, how
Island?
could I watch that without having seen the original Rescue?
Yeah, and it's because I actually have two copies.
Okay. So, this being a parting gift, I'll talk to you guys in 15 years.
Sounds good. Then we should have number 300 by then. No, 5 years, 300.
Oh, speed it up.
Okay, 400.
Slow it down.
Okay, 350. Deal!
Well, kids, believe it or not, you've listened to us blather on about ourselves
I feel so narcissistic.
for over an hour and a half.
Clean.
Send in your questions.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic you like the most, and I stole that from Butch.
That's a good saying.
I thought Willie Mellon said that.
Believe me, if I even had any doubt, I'd cop to it, but that was 100% me.
Excellent.
And it's not that great of a saying, really.
I'm pretty sure you said it.
Are you insane? It's awesome.
Well, the
It's
intent
great.
is awesome. It's just a little cumbersome, I always thought. I was never comfortable
Because I
with
think
it.
it was.
Not after I've said it over 200 times.
Oh, I'm
You
getting
started-
used to it.
You started complaining about comics, and you walked up on, well, comic you.
It was how I actually felt
Oh.
and feel.
Joe?
Oh, man, after that, I feel great. I feel like dancing. Somebody hit my music. Come on, mama.
Good evening, all. I'm ready to record the session. Where is everyone? I don't understand. They told me we were to begin promptly at 11. I don't understand. But wait, what's this? The schedule was for 8. But that's not what they told me. They lied to me. Cory and Joe lied to me. Okay, you two. Allow me to impress upon you the severe mistake you have made. For years my conduct has been largely benign. However, like Bruce Banner, my anger can get the better of me. So, without provocation, you have severed our detente and forced me to unleash upon you the vengeful flames of the Human Torch. You shall curse DC and Marvel for the first comics you have read. So go now, go and begin your life of fear, knowing that when you least expect it, the looming bat of Mage will crash upon you, beating you senseless as you gaze upon your bloody wreckage that was once your life. You will regret the day you have crossed the wrong geek. Who am I talking to?